In the near-future city of New Vesper, technology buzzed through the air like the hum of unseen machinery. The skyline was a tapestry of shimmering glass and steel, with drones flitting between buildings like mechanized birds. Smart devices had become a way of life, integrated seamlessly into every aspect of human existence. For most, it was a convenience. For some, it was a lifeline. Ethan Webb was one of the latter. He lived alone in a modest apartment on the 27th floor of a towering complex. His existence was punctuated by the steady rhythm of work, sleep, and a gnawing sense of isolation that crept in during the quiet hours. Friends had drifted away, and family was distant, both physically and emotionally. It was in those late hours, with the city a quiet hum outside his window, that Ethan decided to invest in a smart pet. The ads were everywhere, customizable, intelligent, and perfect for companionship. They were the ultimate solution for someone like Ethan, who craved connection but had long since given up on finding it in people. He scrolled through the options on his tablet one night, the glow of the screen casting a pale light across his weary face. Dogs, cats, birds, even exotic creatures tailored to one's preferences. Then he saw it. Model LX 900, marketed as the most advanced in personal companionship technology. The promotional video promised an unparalleled experience, touting adaptive behavior, emotional intelligence, and a learning algorithm that would make it seem almost human. Ethan was intrigued. Without much thought, driven by a blend of curiosity and his relentless loneliness, he ordered it. The next day, a sleek, metallic delivery pod arrived at his doorstep. It was unusual, larger than he'd expected, with no visible seams or openings. The delivery drone hovered momentarily before a soft click released the pod onto his welcome mat. A note materialized on the pod's surface. Activate for a companion like no other. Ethan hesitated. The words had an ominous ring to them, but he shook off the unease and pressed the activation button. A soft whirring sound filled the room, the pod's surface shimmering like liquid metal as it began to unfold. The shape that emerged was not a robotic animal or a synthetic construct. Instead, Ethan found himself staring at a young girl, barely older than a teenager, her skin a pale, almost translucent hue, with eyes that shimmered like twin moons. Her hair was a silvery cascade that caught the light, and she was wrapped in a strange iridescent fabric that clung to her form like a second skin. She blinked, her gaze locking onto Ethan with an intensity that made his breath hitch. There was no expression of fear or confusion, only a serene, almost knowing calm. Then she spoke, her voice soft and melodic, carrying an undertone of something ancient and profound. "Are you the one who called me?" she asked. Ethan stumbled back, his mind racing. This wasn't what he had signed up for. His heart pounded as he tried to make sense of what stood before him. "Who? What are you?" The girl tilted her head slightly, studying him. "I am Ziri," she said, the name flowing like a whisper on the wind. "And you, it seems, are my caretaker now." Caretaker. The word struck Ethan like a bolt. This wasn't just a pet, this was something far more complex. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, the air thick with the unknown. I didn't sign up for this," Ethan stammered, his voice tinged with panic. You're not a smart pet." Ziri took a step forward, her movements fluid and graceful, as if she were gliding rather than walking. "I am more than what you expected," she said, her eyes reflecting an ocean of stars. "And now, we are bound by circumstance. But you must understand, Ethan, my being here is no accident." The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in as Ethan struggled to process what was happening. His mind raced with questions, but the foremost was clear and loud. Who had he brought into his home? As if reading his thoughts, Ziri spoke again, her voice softer, almost gentle. "There is much you do not know, but you will. In time, all will be revealed." Ethan sank into the nearest chair, his legs weak beneath him. This was no ordinary day, and Ziri was no ordinary companion. Mystery swirled around her, thick and impenetrable. And in that moment, Ethan knew his life had just. The apartment seemed to pulse with an unfamiliar energy as Ziri stood before him, her presence both unsettling and captivating. Ethan's mind reeled, trying to anchor itself in the mundane details of his life, but nothing about this situation was ordinary. He took a deep breath, willing himself to calm down. "What do you mean by no accident?" he asked, his voice steadier now, though the tremor in his hands betrayed his nerves. Ziri's expression softened, her silver eyes gleaming in the dim light of the apartment. She took another step forward, her movements slow and deliberate, as if she were careful not to spook him. "You were chosen, Ethan," she said. "Though perhaps not in the way you think. There are forces at play far beyond this world, and I am a part of that." Ethan's mind scrambled to find footing. "Chosen? Look, I just ordered a pet. A smart, mechanical companion. Not this." He gestured vaguely toward her, struggling to articulate what this even was. "I'm just an ordinary guy. Why me?" Ziri sighed, a sound that carried the weight of something ancient and weary. "Sometimes, ordinary is precisely what is needed. Your world," she gestured toward the window, beyond which the city stretched like a living organism of metal and glass, "is teetering on the brink of changes you cannot yet see. I was sent here because the balance must be maintained." Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his fingers laced together in a tight grip. "Sent by who? Or what?" He felt as though he were clutching at threads of a vast tapestry that was unraveling before his eyes. Ziri tilted her head, her silver hair cascading like a waterfall of light. "That, Ethan, is a story that spans the stars. For now, all you need to know is that I am here because your world, and perhaps others, depend on it." He could hear the sincerity in her voice, the underlying current of urgency and importance. Yet, he couldn't shake the disbelief, the part of his brain screaming that this was too much to accept all at once. "So, you're telling me you're an alien?" Ziri gave a small, enigmatic smile. "In your terms, yes. But I am more than just a visitor. I am a guardian of sorts." The word lingered in the air between them, heavy with implication. Ethan felt the enormity of the situation bearing down on him, his chest tight with the pressure of it. "And what exactly am I supposed to do in all of this?" Ziri's gaze held his, unwavering and steady. "For now, you are to help me. Provide a place for me to stay. Keep me safe from those who would seek to harm or exploit what they do not understand." Ethan's mouth went dry. "And who would that be?" A shadow crossed Ziri's face, her eyes darkening momentarily. "There are those who know of my existence and what I represent. They will come looking, and when they do, we must be prepared." Ethan stood abruptly, pacing across the room. "I didn't ask for this. I don't know how to deal with interstellar politics or alien guardianships or whatever this is. I'm just a guy with a 9-to-5 job, not some hero." Ziri's gaze softened further, a hint of compassion in her otherwise ethereal demeanor. "No one is asking you to be a hero, Ethan. Just a friend. A protector, until the time comes when I can fulfill my purpose. You were chosen because you have the capacity to care, to shelter me when I am vulnerable. That is all I ask of you." The sincerity in her voice cut through his panic, grounding him momentarily. He stopped pacing, facing her once more. "And if I say no? If I just call the company and tell them they sent me the wrong thing?" Ziri's smile was faint but sad. "You could try. But do you really believe this was a simple shipping error? That a company, even one as advanced as yours, would send someone like me by mistake?" Ethan clenched his jaw, the rational part of his mind warring with the surreal reality before him. He knew deep down she was right. This wasn't a mistake, and there would be no easy way out of it. He rubbed his face with both hands, sighing heavily. "All right, Ziri. You can stay. But we need to figure out what's going on, and fast. I can't have this, whatever this is, turning my life upside down." Ziri nodded, her expression serious. "We will. Together." The word together settled over Ethan like a tentative promise, binding them in a pact neither had anticipated. As the night deepened, the city outside continued its ceaseless hum, oblivious to the cosmic threads weaving a new story within the walls of one unassuming apartment. But Ethan knew this was only the beginning. The mysteries that Ziri carried with her were vast, and the journey they were about to embark on would change everything. The first night was a blur of restless thoughts and fleeting attempts at sleep. Ethan lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, the events of the day playing on an endless loop in his mind. In the other room, Ziri sat silently, her presence a constant reminder of how drastically his life had changed in just a few hours. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing at the edge of something vast and incomprehensible. Every rational part of him screamed to find a way out, to return to the normalcy of his routine. Yet, another part, a deeper, quieter part, was drawn to the mystery of Ziri and what she represented. The next morning, Ethan woke to the smell of something warm and unfamiliar wafting through the apartment. He shuffled out of bed, rubbing his eyes as he made his way to the kitchen. There, he found Ziri standing by the stove, her movements precise and graceful. In her hands, she held a strange, iridescent fruit that shimmered like a gemstone. "Good morning," she said without turning, her voice soft and melodic. "I hope you don't mind. I took the liberty of preparing something for breakfast." Ethan blinked, still groggy and disoriented. "Where did you get that?" he asked, gesturing toward the fruit. Ziri turned to face him, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. "It's from my world. I thought it might be a suitable introduction to my culture." Ethan approached cautiously, peering at the fruit with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "Is it safe?" Ziri nodded. "Perfectly. It's nourishing and will provide you with the energy you need." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I guess I don't have much of a choice, do I?" With a resigned shrug. He accepted the fruit and took a tentative bite. The taste was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Sweet, with a hint of something floral, and a texture that melted in his mouth like spun silk. He couldn't deny it was delicious. Ziri watched him intently, her eyes sparkling with quiet amusement. "See? Not everything from my world is dangerous." Ethan chuckled despite himself, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "Fair enough. But you'll have to forgive me if I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of this." Ziri's expression softened. "I understand. It's a lot to take in. But we have time, and I'll do my best to help you understand." As they sat down together at the small kitchen table, a comfortable silence settled between them. Ethan felt the weight of the previous night's conversation lifting slightly, replaced by a cautious sense of curiosity. "So," he began, breaking the silence, "what exactly are you supposed to do here? You mentioned something about being a guardian." Ziri nodded, her expression growing more serious. "Yes. My purpose here is to protect a delicate balance, one that most of your kind are unaware of. There are forces that seek to disrupt this balance, and my role is to prevent that from happening." Ethan leaned forward, his interest piqued. "And these forces, are they from your world, or ours?" Ziri's gaze darkened. "Both. There are those on your world who would exploit what they do not understand, and there are others from beyond your stars who have more sinister intentions." Ethan's mind raced, trying to grasp the enormity of what she was saying. "Why Earth? Why now?" Ziri sighed, her shoulders sagging slightly. "Because your world is at a tipping point. The technological advancements you've made have brought you closer to understanding the universe in ways that could be dangerous if mishandled. And there are those who would rather see your world fall than rise." The implications of her words sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. He couldn't help but feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. "So, you're here to stop that from happening?" "Yes," Ziri said firmly. "But I cannot do it alone. That's why I need you, Ethan. You may not see it now, but you have a role to play in this." Ethan exhaled slowly, his thoughts swirling. "I don't know if I'm ready for something like this. But I guess I don't have much of a choice, do I?" Ziri's gaze softened once more. "You have more strength than you realize. And together, we can face whatever comes our way." For the first time since her arrival, Ethan felt a flicker of determination ignite within him. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he knew one thing. He couldn't turn away from this. Not now. As the morning sun filtered through the windows, casting a warm glow over the room, Ethan made a silent promise to himself. He would help Ziri, no matter what it took. Because deep down, he knew that her fate, and perhaps the fate of the world, was now intertwined with his own. The days that followed were a whirlwind of adjustments. Ethan tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but it was impossible with Ziri around. Her presence, though calming in moments, was a constant reminder of the strange new reality he had stepped into. She moved through the apartment with an air of quiet confidence, her silver eyes always observing, always aware. Ethan soon realized that Ziri's needs were minimal. She didn't seem to eat much beyond the peculiar fruits she conjured, nor did she require sleep in the traditional sense. Instead, she spent her nights in a meditative state, her body still and serene as if she were in a trance. It was during one of these nights that Ethan's first encounter with the mysterious forces Ziri had warned about began. It started with a soft, almost imperceptible hum that vibrated through the walls of the apartment. Ethan stirred in his sleep, the noise tugging at the edges of his consciousness. When it grew louder, he sat up abruptly, his heart pounding. He glanced around the darkened room, but everything seemed normal, until he noticed the faint glow emanating from the living room. He crept toward the light, the hum intensifying with each step. As he entered the room, he saw Ziri standing near the window, her body silhouetted against the cityscape. Her eyes were closed, but her hands were raised, palms outward as if she were holding back an unseen force. "Ziri," Ethan called softly, his voice trembling. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, as if listening to something far away. Then, in a voice that was both gentle and firm, she said, "They found us." A chill ran down Ethan's spine. "Who's found us? What's going on?" Ziri opened her eyes, the silver glow within them more intense than usual. "There are entities, remnants of a fractured order, who seek to disrupt my mission. They've detected my presence, and they are coming." Ethan's breath quickened. "Coming here? Now?" Ziri nodded. "Yes. But do not fear. I can protect us." Before Ethan could respond, the hum outside grew into a low, droning sound that resonated through the walls. The lights flickered, and for a moment, it felt as though the very fabric of reality was wavering. Ethan stumbled back, his mind racing with panic. "Ziri, what do we do?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ziri stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. Her touch was cool, grounding him in the chaos. "Stay close to me. Whatever happens, do not let go of my hand." Ethan nodded, grasping her hand tightly as the room around them seemed to distort. The walls shimmered, the furniture vibrating as if caught in an unseen storm. And then, with a sudden jolt, the apartment was plunged into silence. Ethan blinked, his eyes adjusting to the sudden darkness. What just happened? Ziri's gaze was fixed on the window, her expression unreadable. "They are testing our defenses." This was only the beginning. As if on cue, a sharp, metallic scraping sound echoed from the hallway outside. Ethan's pulse quickened, fear tightening his throat. "What is that?" Ziri pulled him back toward the center of the room, her movements swift and precise. "They are probing. We must not let them breach the threshold." Ethan swallowed hard, his grip on her hand tightening. "How do we stop them?" Ziri closed her eyes, her brow furrowing in concentration. "There are barriers I can reinforce, but it will take time. You must trust me." Ethan nodded, though he felt anything but confident. "I trust you." Ziri began to chant softly, the words flowing from her lips in a language Ethan couldn't understand. The air around them grew thick, charged with an energy that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He could feel it, a protective force building, pushing against whatever was trying to invade their space. The scraping sound intensified, accompanied by a low growl that seemed to vibrate through the walls. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, but he stayed rooted beside Ziri, his hand clasped firmly in hers. Minutes passed, each one stretching into an eternity. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the noise stopped. The hum faded, and the room returned to its normal state. The lights flickered back on, casting a warm glow over the apartment. Ethan exhaled a shaky breath, his legs threatening to give out beneath him. "Is it over?" Ziri opened her eyes, the silver glow dimming slightly. "For now. But they will return. We must be ready." Ethan nodded, though his mind was still reeling. "Ready for what, exactly? What are they?" Ziri's expression darkened, her voice low and serious. They are remnants of a time long past, entities that thrive on chaos and destruction. They sense the balance I am here to protect and seek to unravel it. They cannot be allowed to succeed. Ethan rubbed his face, trying to process everything. So, what do we do next? Ziri placed a hand on his shoulder, her gaze steady. We prepare. And we find allies. This is not a battle we can face alone. Ethan nodded, determination hardening his features. He didn't fully understand the scope of the danger, but one thing was clear. He was now a part of something much larger than himself, and there was no turning back. The following days were a tense blur of preparations. Ethan's once quiet and predictable life had become a whirlwind of uncertainty and danger. Ziri worked tirelessly, reinforcing the apartment with barriers of energy that shimmered faintly in the air, visible only when the light hit them just right. She explained that these defenses were temporary, mere stopgaps until they could find more permanent solutions. Ethan, for his part, felt like a ship adrift in a storm. His world had been upended, and the weight of the unknown pressed heavily on his mind. He couldn't help but feel out of his depth, but he resolved to help Ziri however he could. Together, they began to plan their next move. One evening, as the city outside buzzed with its usual rhythm, Ziri called Ethan over to the living room. She had spread out a series of strange, glowing crystals on the coffee table, each one pulsing with a soft light. These are conduits, she explained, gesturing to the crystals. They can amplify my abilities and help us communicate with others who may be able to assist. Ethan frowned, his curiosity piqued. Others? You mean there are more like you? Ziri nodded. There are others, though they are scattered across different realms and dimensions. Some are guardians like me, while others have their own unique roles in maintaining the balance of the universe. Ethan sat down, leaning forward to get a closer look at the crystals. And you think they can help us? They must, Ziri said, her voice firm. The forces against us are too strong to face alone. We need allies who understand the stakes and who have the power to stand with us. Ethan exhaled slowly, his mind racing with questions. How do we contact them? Ziri picked up one of the crystals, holding it between her slender fingers. I will create a beacon, a signal that can reach across the void and call them to us. But it's a risk. The same signal that brings allies may also attract our enemies. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. So we could be inviting more danger. Ziri nodded solemnly. Yes. But we have no choice. We must take that risk if we are to survive. Ethan rubbed his temples, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He knew Ziri was right. They couldn't stay hidden forever, not with the threat looming so close. All right, he said, meeting her gaze. Let's do it. Ziri smiled faintly, a glimmer of relief in her eyes. Thank you, Ethan. Your courage will make all the difference. With that, she set to work, placing the crystals in a precise pattern on the table. She murmured incantations in her melodic, alien language, and the crystals began to glow brighter, their light filling the room with an ethereal radiance. Ethan watched in awe as the energy pulsed and flowed between the crystals, forming a network of luminous lines that hovered in the air. Ziri's voice rose, her chant reaching a crescendo, and with a final word, the light surged, sending a pulse of energy outward. Ethan felt it pass through him, a wave of warmth and power that seemed to vibrate in his very bones. It is done, Ziri said, her voice barely a whisper now, her energy spent. Ethan reached out to steady her as she swayed slightly. Are you okay? She nodded, though she looked pale and tired. I'll recover. The beacon is set. Now we wait. Ethan helped her to the couch, where she sank down with a weary sigh. He sat beside her, the room still glowing softly from the residual energy of the crystals. How long do you think it will take? Ziri leaned back, closing her eyes. It's hard to say. Time moves differently across the realms. But they will come. Ethan stared at the crystals, the reality of their situation settling over him like a heavy cloak. The risk was immense, but so was the potential for salvation. All they could do now was hope that their message reached the right beings, and that they would arrive in time. As the city lights flickered outside, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were no longer alone, and soon, they would face whatever came next together, with allies by their side. Days passed with a tense anticipation hanging in the air. Each night, Ethan found himself staring out the window, watching the city below, half expecting something, or someone, to arrive. Ziri had recovered quickly from the exertion of sending the beacon, her energy and focus seemingly restored. Yet, even she couldn't hide the underlying tension in her demeanor as they waited. It was on the third night after the beacon's activation that something finally happened. Ethan was in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee, when a soft, rhythmic knock echoed from the front door. He froze, the mug halfway to his lips, his heart leaping into his throat. For a moment, he wondered if it was just a neighbor or a delivery, something mundane. But deep down, he knew better. "Ziri," he called, setting the mug down with trembling hands. "Someone's at the door." She appeared in the doorway almost instantly, her silver eyes sharp and alert. She nodded once, signaling for him to step back, and moved to the door. With a deep breath, she placed her hand against the wood, murmuring a few words under her breath. A soft blue light emanated from her palm, spreading across the surface like a protective shield. "Who is it?" Ethan whispered, his voice tight with anxiety. Ziri didn't answer immediately. She closed her eyes, as if listening beyond the door, before she finally spoke. "They are here. Allies." Relief flooded Ethan's body, though it was tempered with caution. Ziri gestured for him to stand beside her as she lowered the shield. With a flick of her wrist, the door unlocked and swung open. 3 figures stood in the hallway, each one cloaked in a shimmering, otherworldly fabric that seemed to shift and change with the light. They were humanoid, but their features were ethereal, their eyes glowing faintly with the same silver hue as Ziri's. The tallest of them stepped forward, their gaze fixed intently on Ziri. "Guardian Ziri," the figure said, their voice resonating with an almost musical quality. "We received your beacon." Ziri inclined her head respectfully. "I am grateful you came. We are in dire need of assistance." The tallest figure's gaze flicked to Ethan, studying him briefly. "And this human? He is your protector." Ziri nodded. "Ethan has provided me with shelter and support. He is trustworthy." The figure smiled faintly, a gesture that was both kind and knowing. "Then we are honored to meet him. I am Talir, and these are my companions, Lira and Sion. We are here to aid you in your mission." Ethan stepped forward, still unsure but determined to show his gratitude. "Thank you for coming. We've had some close calls recently." Talir's expression grew serious. "We know. The entities that pursue you are remnants of the Dark Nexus, a force that seeks to consume and destroy. Their presence here is a threat to your world and many others." Ethan exchanged a glance with Ziri, his stomach churning at the mention of the Dark Nexus. "So, how do we stop them?" Talir's gaze hardened. "We must confront them directly, seal the rift they are using to enter this dimension, and banish them back to the void. It will not be easy, but together we can succeed." Ziri stepped closer to Ethan, her voice calm but firm. "This will be dangerous. But with their help, we stand a chance." Ethan nodded, his fear giving way to resolve. "I'm in. Whatever it takes." Talir gestured toward the open doorway. "Then we must act swiftly. The rift is growing, and soon it will be beyond our ability to contain." They moved quickly, gathering what few supplies they had and following Talir and the others into the night. The city seemed oblivious to the cosmic battle about to unfold, its lights twinkling innocently in the distance. Talir led them to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. As they approached, the air grew colder, charged with a malevolent energy that made Ethan's skin prickle. Inside, the rift was a pulsating void, its darkness a stark contrast to the dimly lit space around it. Lira and Sion moved to opposite sides of the rift, their hands glowing as they began to weave intricate patterns of light in the air. Talir turned to Ziri and Ethan. "We must guard them while they work. The entities will sense our presence and try to stop us." No sooner had the words left his mouth than the air around them shimmered, and dark, shadowy forms began to materialize. The entities were twisted, ethereal creatures, their shapes constantly shifting as they moved toward the group with menacing intent. Ethan felt his heart hammering in his chest, but he stood his ground, gripping the makeshift weapon Talir had given him. Ziri stepped forward, her body glowing with a fierce light, and together, they met the entities head-on. The battle was chaotic and intense. Ethan swung his weapon, striking at the shadows, while Ziri unleashed bursts of energy that sent the creatures reeling. Talir fought beside them, his movements precise and deadly. Despite the odds, they held their ground, protecting Lira and Sion as they continued to seal the rift. Time seemed to stretch, every moment a blur of light and darkness, until finally, with a blinding flash, the rift began to close. The entities shrieked in agony, their forms dissolving as the void sealed shut. When the last of the shadows vanished, the warehouse fell silent, save for the labored breathing of the group. The rift was gone, and the air was clear once more. Ethan sank to his knees, exhaustion washing over him. He looked up to see Ziri standing tall, her light dimming but her eyes filled with quiet triumph. "It's over," she said softly. Talir approached, his expression one of solemn pride. "You have done well, Guardian. The balance is restored, for now." Ziri nodded, turning to Ethan with a small smile. "We couldn't have done it without you." Ethan managed a tired grin, feeling a sense of accomplishment and relief. "I'm just glad it's over." Talir placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Your bravery will not be forgotten. You are part of something much larger now, and your role was pivotal." Ethan nodded, the weight of their words sinking in. He wasn't just an ordinary man anymore. He was part of a cosmic struggle, one that had tested his limits and redefined his life. As the dawn broke over the city, the group made their way back to the apartment. The immediate threat had passed, but Ethan knew the journey wasn't truly over. There would always be forces seeking to disrupt the balance, and he would be ready to face them, with Ziri and their newfound allies by his side. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt a sense of purpose, knowing that he had made a difference. Not just for himself, but for the entire world.